Hello, thank you very much for subscribing to this platform where we shall be talking about the contract of sale of goods and different other cost units. Today's discussion shall be delving into the passing of risk. We shall be talking about passing of risk and under what circumstances does it pass to the buyer, or under what circumstances does it not pass to the buyer? Under which circumstance does it remain with the seller? Um, for starters, risk here refers to any loss or damages or destruction of goods. And when we say passing of risk, it means when does that loss, damage, or destruction of the goods, when does the responsibility of the losses pass to the buyer? When does the seller cease to be liable for those losses in the goods? However, the general rule is that risk falls on the owner of the goods. That is the general rule. Risk falls on the owner of the goods. So whoever is not the owner of the goods will not be liable for the risk. You can look at section 20, section 27, section 27 clause 1, which states the general rule that risk prima facie passes with property. So once you're the owner of that good, the risk will automatically pass to you. However, under section 25, under section 25, it gives when that risk can pass to the buyer. Section 25 of the Sale of Goods and Supply of Services Act, it states that unless otherwise agreed by the parties in the contract, the goods remain at the seller's risk until the property in that goods passes. That is section 25. That is section that is section 27. Section 27 clause 1. It says that unless otherwise agreed, the goods remain at the seller's risk until the property in the goods is transferred to the buyer. That supports the general rule, risk prima facie passes with property. You can look at the case of Tarling versus Baxter, which it's also governs this general rule. The court stated that risk passes to the buyer once the property has passed, though it wasn't delivered yet. So at some instance, the goods can still be at the possession of the seller. But once you have agreed, that risk will pass in 4 days. After the 4 days, even if the good is still at the possession of the seller, the buyer will be liable for any risk, loss, or damages that will be conferred on the goods. So let us look at the exceptions to the passing of goods. The exceptions. The exceptions under the Sale of Goods Act, under Section 20 plus 1 gives the exceptions. That is upon agreement. Upon agreement. So remember the general rule is that risk automatically passes when the property of the goods has passed to the buyer. However, here, Section 27 gives an exception upon agreement, where the parties to the contract agrees that the risk will pass on this date, even though property has passed, even though the buyer is in the possession of the goods, the seller can still remain liable for the risk. For example, sell for you, I can sell to you my phone. You'll give me the consideration, the contract will be in full. However, we shall say, um, though you're having the possession of the phone, if any damage happened to the phone within this period of time, you can bring it back to me, I'll be liable. So it's upon the agreement of the parties. You can see that in the case of Head versus Tata Cell. Head versus Tata Cell, where the court stated that the effect of the contract was to vest the property in horse, but subject to a right of rescission if the property had not answered the description. Thus, the risk falls on the buyer. So here the agreement was that if the horse did not meet the description of the buyer can resign. So when the buyer bought the horse got some injury. So the buyer sued the seller for the risk, and the court said that the effect of the contract was to vest the property in horse in the buyer, subject to a right of rescission if the property had not answered the description. So the buyer could resign. The contract. That is the case of Head versus Tata Cell. Another exception is where delivery delayed through the fault of either the buyer or the seller. That is Section 27, Clause 4. Where delivery is late through the fault of either the buyer or the seller, the party at fault bears the risk. If the seller and the buyer agrees that the buyer will be the one to deliver the goods, it means you're the one to come at my place and you pick that item, but you delayed. Let me say we agree that you'll come for the goods on the 4th. You will deliver the goods on the 4th, but you delayed, and on the 4th or after the 4th, because that is when we intend that the property in that good should pass. But you delayed and you came on the 6th. After the 4th, we can say, let us assume that fire broke out and that goods got damaged. Fire broke out. The responsibility will lie on the buyer. The responsibility will lie on the because he is the one at fault. He delayed to come and pick the goods. Um, you can look at the case of Dembi. You can look at the case of Dembi Hamilton versus Baden. In this case, it was stated where one of the parties a bailee and the loss occurs through the bailee's lack of reasonable care. Actually, this is you can look at that case and you read more about it. The, the another exception is delivery via sea transit. Excuse me. Delivery via sea transit, where the seller fails because it's the duty of the seller. Assuming I entered into an agreement or an agreement with the seller stays in Dubai, I'm in Uganda. We entered into an agreement or a contract of sale to purchase a car. It is the duty of the seller before commencing the delivery of that good via the sea to notify me that Chris, your item is on delivery, so that it gives me chance to monitor where my goods have reached. However, if the seller negligently fails to notify the buyer, the seller will still be liable for the risk. If the seller notifies the buyer, then the buyer will be liable for the risk. You can look at that under Section 40, Clause 4, and Section 40, Clause 5. Another exemption is that where the seller delivers goods at a different place of delivery as agreed by the terms of the contract. If I say you will deliver this good at my working place, but you deliver it somewhere else, if any risk happen, you will be, as the seller, you will be liable for the risk. Yeah, so that is all about passing of risks. You just have to mind about when does it pass, and you also mind about the exceptions. Not forgetting Section 27. Because Section 27, it broadly explains how risk passes, and it gives the exceptions to the general rule also. However, don't forget Section 40, which also gives some of the exceptions. That is delivery by sea transit, delivery by carrier. Please go ahead and read these sections so that you understand properly. Thank you very much for participating in this discussion. Thank you very much.